So there is a lot of history behind this project. To keep it short and sweet, a couple of years ago when Zack Snyder was directing a Justice League movie, his daughter tragically passed away, meaning he would step away from the project, and Warner Brothers brought in Joss Whedon to finish off the movie. But Joss Whedon had other plans and pretty much changed up nearly everything about this movie, and also they had to keep it under 2 hours. Although understandable that Snyder stepped away from the project, people were very disappointed that they weren't going to see his true vision and protested online for ages for them to release Zack Snyder's version of Justice League. Many protested with not actually believing, and I can say that has paid off, and we finally have Zack Snyder's version of the Justice League, and it's 4 hours long. I, amongst everyone, feel very fortunate to be able to see this, as we haven't really seen anything like this done before, where a director gets to release the same but a completely different movie many years after, especially being given additional budgets to complete that dream. So here is my review of Zack Snyder's Justice League, or as more of the fans like to call it, the Snyder Cut. Zack Snyder's definitive director's cut of Justice League, determined to ensure Superman's ultimate sacrifice was not in vain, Bruce Wayne aligns forces with Diana Prince with plans to recruit a team of metahumans to protect the world from an approaching threat of catastrophic proportions. But did it live up to any of its hype, or was it a bit of a disappointment? You know, we're just going to dive straight into my positives and my negatives for this movie, starting with my positives. So, to begin with, to be honest, I don't really know where to start. Overall, this movie just feels epic. The last movie, on paper, you'd think, oh, it's epic, but it was extremely underwhelming and didn't feel like the stakes were high at all. By the way, there'll be a lot of comparisons to that theatrical cut in this video. Yeah, this movie feels epic and it matches the tone that it should. It's a very ambitious plot. You know, the world is at stake. A big difference that I noticed was the addition of some of the music, whether that was, you know, just rock music or Wonder Woman's theme song. It really elevated some of the scenes in which were actually used in that theatrical cut. So it's how you use those scenes which makes this feel bigger, grander. And the same goes for dialogue. They did keep in some things, but they've added so much around it that it doesn't feel as cheesy, it actually feels epic itself. Because they had such a short runtime, I've mentioned before, they've rushed into this. They were rushing a lot of this plot, especially the Flash and Cyborg, as they hadn't really been introduced in previous films, but here they get that depth, that development that makes us care about them and actually understand them, and that's what really amazed me about this movie. Obviously it's 4 hours long and they probably wouldn't have been able to make a 4-hour version with the theatrical cut, but just there's so much detail here. Watching through the theatrical cut again yesterday, I could tell things were glossed over, but watching this 4-hour Snyder cut of it, it just gives so much more detail and context to a lot of their decisions, and that's what really makes them feel like a team. Their characters, they discuss more of their plans. They don't just go in, you know, agreeing straight on the spot. They have to discuss certain things which might not go to plan. They suggest different ideas. It just feels so much more realistic, and these characters, they do feel more real. They interact as normal people. It's not for the plot's sake to move it forward. It's not cheesy comedy chucked in at the last minute. They do feel like real people who know that their choices mean something. It could impact the rest of the world. The things like that and their interactions, it made for some chemistry, and I thought in the Justice League theatrical cut they didn't have any chemistry, so it was hard to care about them. But here, who would have thought a couple of years ago that I would really care about the Cyborg, because I found him so bland in that theatrical cut. But now we have some context behind stuff. We see him more on his personal level, his relationship with his father and mother, his origins. It was really powerful stuff. And the death of Superman from Batman v Superman, I'm not gonna lie, when I rewatched the theatrical cut, some points I'd actually forget about that whole thing altogether, but here there are some elements which are continuously sprinkled throughout this movie's runtime that it shows that this has an effect on these people, especially Bruce. You see how much guilt he is filled with, and once again it does put our characters down to earth and understandable, and those sort of things, those personal elements and their chemistry all together, this does feel like a united superhero team-up movie, one which is absolutely brilliant. Steppenwolf, he was this generic villain who seemed to have no motivation. Here, his motive is clear, and we kind of see his story a bit, but just his look and the sound of him, it's so much more menacing compared to his generic dialogue from the theatrical cut, as well as the poor CGI. Here, he looks like an absolute monster. And it's not even just for the characters. Some things have some more context and development themselves, like the mother boxes. They're pictured here as much more of a bigger deal than it initially had been. They are as powerful as the Infinity Stones. They're dealt with here in such a good way, which makes them feel so powerful. They need to be delicate with them. It's important that they don't fall into the wrong hands, because then, in a way similar to Thanos, it's the end of the world to some extent. Maybe even a harder world to live in than what the MCU had with the snap. A big criticism I had of Batman v Superman, which then followed into the Justice League movie, was that they were rushing things, and I stand by that they were rushing things into this big team-up movie which they were trying to play catch-up with the MCU. But here, with how they deal with the characters and how they take their time, obviously it's 4 hours long, but they take their time, and once everything's together, it doesn't feel rushed at all. Even as this was initially filmed before Aquaman was released, you can think, oh, if I forget about Aquaman's original story, it still is as good because they are given depth, they are given meaning, and what this fight would mean to them. There are even some minor details, some which weren't included in the theatrical cut, which get heavy explanations and just expands this universe and these characters. I don't really want to go into specifics or spoiler reasons, but I'll just say that it has something to do with us living in a society. But overall, with the Snyder Cut, it improves on everything the theatrical cut has done. It makes this movie so much better, but there are a tiny few negatives I have with it, so let's get into that. So moving into my negatives, I don't actually have that much to say, and of those things I have to say, they're not really that bad. An obvious one is the 4-hour runtime. It is quite exhausting, but you do get a lot for that runtime. It's not like you're wasting time, but it can be quite exhausting. They do actually split it up into 6 parts and an epilogue, so that's an easy way to kind of stop and have a break. But I feel like maybe if they'd done it as a mini-series initially, that could have been good as well, even though I think they are releasing it with an option to watch as a mini-series. The other thing, which really isn't that important, but the fact that this is an R-rated movie went under the radar. I knew about it, but you know, the 4-hour runtime was the one thing that stood out ahead of that R rating, and I would have liked to see more which warranted this R rating. I know there are a few F-bombs here and there, and if you look in the background, there is some R-rated action, as well as a few R-rated things which happen right in front of us, which I can't go into. It would have been cool to see more. The lack of R-rated things compared to what I would have wanted doesn't affect the quality of this movie, and I'm not saying that more stuff would have made it better. I just think it would have been cooler, especially since they had this R rating to go full out with some things. Otherwise, they could have just maybe stuck to that rating of 12. So overall, I think everyone who wanted Snyder's cut of the Justice League will be extremely satisfied. I know I am, and I doubt any of you have watched it, but one of my first ever videos, I did my kind of reaction to the Snyder Cut news back last year. It's not a great video, but I said in that if they were to get this Snyder Cut done properly, and if it was, you know, a massive success, maybe unlikely, I'm not sure, but as this has proven, anything's possible, but they should continue the DCEU with this as their Justice League movie instead of the theatrical cut. Kind of forget that one existed, because from what they showed here, there is so much quality that can be done, and from those new things they bring in, there is a lot of potential for where this could go. So I believe Zack Snyder created the perfect Justice League movie, and although he is done with directing DC movies, I would love for, I guess, the Snyderverse to continue within the DCEU. This almost makes me feel bad for some of the things I said were bad with Batman v Superman, because I think the fact that this does pull off those things which were initially rushed from my point of view, it kind of makes Batman v Superman less flawed. My overall score for the Snyder Cut, or Zack Snyder's Justice League, is an 88%. Very good. It's gonna be hard to find people who really didn't like this movie. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please let me know in the comments what you thought of the Snyder Cut. I'm sure people would be very enthusiastic to share their thoughts. I'd really appreciate if you would like and subscribe. And if you're a new subscriber, I hope to see you in my upcoming videos.